European Union's election observers mission. How accurate is their report on our general elections? The Tinubu camp says it's exaggerated. They exaggerated the issues. The Obi camp says it underreported the issues. The Atiku camp says it was just right. Now, this report was about the elections on February 25th and March 18th. And according to the European Union's EOM report, a quarter of polling units did not have a result on iReV at the moment that INEC declared Bola Tinubu President-Elect. And that's just one of the discrepancies that the EU report called out. It's also accusing INEC of allegedly breaking its own rules and undermining trust in the process. And we started this conversation yesterday with Samson Itodo from Yaga. My guest today is also from Yaga, where she is Director of Programs, Cynthia Mbamalu. Cynthia, welcome back to Hard Facts.
Hi, good evening, and thanks for having me on.
Lagos, let's also hear from you. What questions or comments do you have about the EU's election report? This is a question I asked yesterday, but I'll ask again, Cynthia. What's Yaga's overall assessment of the EU's report, the EU EOM's report?
Well, I think first, perhaps we would not say Yaga's overall assessment. Because we would also be issuing or producing our final reports on the elections.
Right.
As a civil society organization and a citizens observer group, I would say that the EU's report is quite comprehensive in, one, identifying where the challenges are, identifying where some progress were made, and providing key recommendations. And like every other election observation mission who understands the role they have in observing elections, their role basically is to assess the overall conduct of the elections without any form of bias and to provide information based on their observation. So we always say the role of an observer is to watch, document, and report, meaning that whatever you watch, you have the responsibility to document and to report, which is what the EU has done. And for different sides receiving the reports differently, I also do believe that it is a report, an observation report. There is nothing in the reporting we're mandating you to do this. So if you look at the recommendation, say we recommend, meaning that not every side would love the findings from the report. Not every side would also want to hear or whether would want to read observation findings that may implicate or may not support the agitations. And it's left for those groups to also issue their own reports and their statements and let the audience, decide at the end of the day.
Okay. And now this report, like you mentioned, made recommendations, 23 in total, but lists 6 of them as key. Number one, revise election laws and regulations to remove ambiguities and conflicting interpretations. They suggest that INEC sets up an inclusive process for this. And I want to talk about that a bit, that the ambiguities part, right? Revising laws and regulations to remove ambiguities. What ambiguities do you believe exist in the current legal framework for elections?
Well, I think I would start with the most contentious and most controversial, which is issues around the electronic transmission of results. And because, I believe that these elections, one contentious issue was the electoral technology, especially the INEC results viewing portal. Now, the Electoral Act, which was an act a lot of Nigerians fought for, and I do believe a lot of young people advocated for electoral technology. In fact, I think that was the major issue they cared about. I'm not sure a lot of young people knew about any of that thing in the Electoral Act, except technology. So it showed that you had a larger percentage of the youth who wanted to see technology enable transparency in the elections.
Right.
The Electoral Act provides INEC with the power or the discretion to determine the mode of transmission of results.
Right.
At the level of the provisions around collation, it also provides that at collation, there is a process that requires the collation officers to cross-check or confirm to verify the accuracy of the results from those transferred, which is the manual, and that the version transmitted. Now, there is a lot of conversation around whether transmit means electronic, because in the law, there is, in some of the sections, you could see there was almost like, at a point, it seemed like, okay, this is required. At some point, it seemed like perhaps not really electronic transmission. Any transmission could work. But then you have the electoral, the INEC guidelines. Now, because the Act empowers the Electoral Commission to make policies. Now, the policies of the Electoral Commission regulate the conduct of elections. Now, INEC produced the guidelines for elections, the 2023 guidelines for the general elections. And within the guidelines, what the guidelines does basically is it expands on the provisions of the law, because the law cannot over-prescribe. The law gives general powers, and then the guidelines highlight step-by-step procedures. So if you go to the guidelines, step-by-step procedures on how voting would be conducted, accreditation, voting. In fact, it begins with setup, accreditation, voting, then results management. Now, within the guidelines, because there's the guidelines, and there is the manual. The manual is used to train the officials, the ad hoc officials. So within the guidelines, when it came to the conversations around results management, the guideline provides, at the point of collation, in fact, it's talked about at the ward level, there's a provision that the officials confirm the results that has been manually transferred. That is the result sheets from EC8A, the result sheet from the polling units. At the point of collation at ward, there's an expectation that a verification is done with the electronically transmitted one. And in fact, in one of the provisions, it talks about where there is discrepancy with what was uploaded on the portal and the manual, then the electronic version ought to suffice. However, because it was when the portal wasn't working and a lot of Nigerians started talking, that all of a sudden legality or non-legality of the results being portal became a topical issue. And one of the things we did observe was there was that lack of clarity on emphasis on who, or rather that makes it mandatory that process of electronically uploading the results to the portal is mandatory, and if it is not adhered to, could impact on the process of results management. So, where a lot of observer groups and a lot of groups raised the issue around the not uploading of the results. But if you look at the legal framework, honestly, there is a need for better clarity. Even if we can't have that in the Electoral Act, because, we can't over-prescribe in the law, but the guidelines also. And a clarity on the part of what happens if there is no electronically transmitted result, because the question was, if there is a requirement to verify with the electronic version of results, and there were no results uploaded on the portal, does it mean that that process of verification was not adhered to? If there was an expectation that where there's discrepancy in the results, that the electronic version would suffice, what happens where there is nothing to even verify to confirm discrepancy? So there is nothing responding to these questions, which is why a lot of, for those of us who are engaging in the process, a lot of citizens, we believe that the result portal was part of the results management process, that there was a manual process and there is the electronic process, and both of them run side by side. They complement each other. No one was to substitute. That was the belief. But if you follow the conversations post the election, the Election Commission had argued and said, well, there was nothing in the law to invalidate a process if the results were not uploaded on the portal, which is what made a lot of us go back to start analyzing these laws, because sometimes you read these laws from a place of innocence, right? And you're like,
and good faith,
these are the things we are
and good faith, you read it from a place of good faith. Yes.
Yeah, exactly, and you're certain that, okay, this is what is expected, especially because before the elections, the chair of the commission himself had sold the idea of the iReV. I mean, I always tell people, Nigerians did not envision or dream INEC's result viewing portal.
Right.
It was an introduction of the Electoral Commission.
Right.
It was an innovation that the Electoral Commission sold to Nigerians.
Right.
It was an innovation that he sold so much that it wasn't just in Nigeria. I mean, I remember the Chatham House speech. I remember the conversation in the US. So a lot of people built their expectations because of the assurances from the commission until we saw it not work on elections day. And I understand why the European Union would ask for, when it comes to the law and the regulations, honestly, we need that clarity to remove all ambiguities. That's one. The second is also the provision around review of results. It was a new introduction in the Electoral Act 2022, the provision that gives INEC the power to review results within 7 days if the results are not declared voluntarily or if the results are not declared in line with the Electoral Act, the guidelines, and the manual. The Act actually recognizes the manual and the guidelines in that section.
Now, are the election guidelines election guidelines that INEC published binding on INEC? What I mean by binding is, does deviating from the guidelines nullify the elections under the Electoral Act?
So now, because this becomes a legal conversation,
you're a lawyer,
and when it comes. Yes. But because this case is in court, I will not be able to speak much on it. But what I can say from previous elections adjudication is usually court considers what they call the hierarchy of laws.
Okay.
Like how the Constitution supersedes legislation.
Okay.
So if a legislation is not in line with the Constitution supersedes.
Yeah.
So you have that. You have legislations now. Guidelines and policies are under the Act.
Okay.
So the Electoral Act supersedes that. So there is a conversation around public institutions. When you make guidelines and rules, you are mandated to apply your guidelines and rules. And where there is any means of deviation, all you need to do is either amend quickly or you provide a justification to say we'll be stepping aside or reviewing this because of 1, 2, 3. However, like I said, because this is a case in court, and I know this is one of the contentious issues in court, I would not necessarily speak on that. But if I'm looking at past, that was why we had to push for the law to be amended to include electronic accreditation of voters.
Right.
Because remember, we've been deploying smart card readers and all before the amendment to the Act. The smart card reader was an introduction of INEC's guidelines and policy. And so when there was a contention between the data in the smart card reader and the data on the register of voters,
right,
because the register of voters was recognized by the law and not the smart card reader, parties who try to rely on that data always never had their way, because the court would have to, apply the hierarchy of laws. And normally they would just give an advisory and say, for subsequent, this is an opportunity to review the law to empower the commission to deploy this, which was why the new Electoral Act had to specifically empower INEC to accredit voters electronically, so that subsequently you can rely on the data from the beavers.
Does the Electoral Act say anything that contradicts the electoral guidelines provisions about electronic transmission?
Sorry, I didn't get that question.
Does the Electoral Act say anything that contradicts the electoral guidelines provisions about electronic transmission?
Well, so the part where you can talk about the conversation is what the Electoral Act does basically, or did, is it empowered INEC to electronically transmit results. Even though INEC had said what they were doing was uploading results, not necessarily electronically transmitting, it was uploading on the portal. The Electoral Act, if you read the sections of the Electoral Act, there is more clarity on the manual collation than the electronic collation. So, which is why I said in the Act, which is what the Act is supposed to do basically. The Act is supposed to empower the Commission to do certain things, and then the Commission will do that. However, there is a requirement for a process of verification with the transmitted results, which shows that the Act envisaged that there is a manual process, but there is also a parallel process of electronic transmission, which should help provide transparency in the results management process. And so, boy, because I'm speaking as a lawyer now, and I understand the conversations around this. It's just like I said, it's just that need for better clarity, because we've seen that if it is easier for a provision to be manipulated if it is not clear, or if there is no major emphasis on certain things. So I mean, as someone that engaged the process, I do not see any justification for why we did not have the results viewing portal for the presidential elections active on elections day. I don't see any justification in that. Because as practitioners in this space, the idea is you engage the process, you advocate, and when there are new things introduced, you want to see it implemented. And we also believe that if the Electoral Commission knew about these elections, at least 1 year to the elections, they knew we would have elections. What was required on the part of the Electoral Commission, INEC, is to ensure that things are in place to get the process working. So you can't come last minute and just act like, oh, we didn't know we were going to upload results on the presidential portal, or we were not ready. The idea is when you do this, you put several measures in place to help prevent or mitigate any risk or threat or any challenge that may occur. And if at any point in time there was a belief that this would be challenging, then an immediate or timely communication should have been provided to the population, to the people, with explanation on this is why this is not working. These are the alternatives we're putting, or the work we're doing so far. These are the alternatives. And which is where a lot of people started getting a bit upset, because until Sunday, there was no major communication. Election was on Saturday, right?
Right.
To say, okay, this is why. A lot of people were just wondering what is going on.
What's going on, yes. And there was just silence. There was silence.
Yeah. And there was just silence.
Yeah.
And then post the election also, we've not had any robust conversation or explanation from the commission to explain that, okay, yes, we gave a one-pager statement because it was hit of an election, but this is what truly happened. So it's also about the responsibility on public institutions to, one, abide by their guidelines or their manuals, and to leave, to ensure that their commitments to the people are strictly adhered to, because there was a part around the responsibility on the state institution when you make a commitment, when you put a guideline. If you want to step aside, even if it's one section of the guideline,
okay,
there could be due communication that, okay, this section, there is a problem here, and we will not use it. But all of these conversations and communications, we didn't see that coming in.
We didn't get it, yeah.
And so I wouldn't blame the European Union's observation. They also were in the field, and a lot of international organizations were looking forward to the portal working, but they've also made that very important recommendation that we need to actually provide some clarity when it comes to different, not just results. I just picked this because I know this is one of the major, like I talked about the review of the results. Review of the results. I mean, at some point where parties were objecting to the collation process, there should have also been that conversation of, okay, if you're objecting, we have the power as the Electoral Commission under this provision to take complaints before final declaration. Right. Can parties objecting officially make a complaint on where you had issues with the result collation process, and we address that before the final declaration? Because the Act gives 7 days for that review to happen. And so there was also that part around the guideline further expanded on that. Well, the guideline in expanding on that was the parties have to report. So it almost seemed like, okay, we're not, which I feel a lot of parties perhaps are not so familiar with that section, because it's not enough to just object.
But 7 days is a long time in political hours, and especially in a country where we're saying to people, go to court. You know, we're saying to people, go to court, because antecedent shows that if you can get a horrid declaration first and ask the aggrieved to go to court, chances are the court may be unwilling to upset what has been pronounced already by the returning officers, especially with presidential elections. So, should that 7 day window be perhaps shortened? Should it be immediate? Should it be, if a complaint is raised, you address it, you don't move forward, to also send a message to voters and the public that, look, we are committed and committing to being transparent. We're not hiding anything. We are not up to any, sinister things. We want this process to go as smoothly as you do as well. Is 7 days perhaps too long, especially considering that collation takes anywhere between 2 to 3 days, 4 days if we're slow anyway. So that means we have 3 more days to go. Is that 7 days a bit too tongue in cheek?
Well, so the counting of the 7 days begins with when collation starts at ward collation, moving from polling unit to the ward.
Right.
Because what it says is when a returning officer declares, so returning officers declare the results depending on what election. The idea is, because convention around 7 days, we could have that, but the law doesn't say it must get to 7 days. It just says it gives this commission enough time to review. And the idea is, for instance, because it's presidential elections and one of the parties is challenging the results announced by a returning officer from, let's say, state A, and said this result was not declared in line with this. What is required for the review would be the commission, because it's not an INEC chairperson's responsibility. We would need time to, one, possibly look at the results that are declared. It could make further inquiries to, okay, what happened at the LGA level, or what happened at the ward level, right? And that is the documentation, because we have about 170,000 plus polling units. And state levels are different. So imagine if you have complaints from more than one state. The idea is to have at least sufficient time to review that. But what your point I'm even making is also that we have parties raising objection at the point when the state's results started coming in.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And there was nothing stopping the chair of the commission, for instance. You are raising a lot of objections. Even though I feel, because you're raising a lot of objections, this is not what to do. If you want to object, officially make a report and would review before we finally declare the results.
Right.
Because as results were announced for states, complaints were coming, you had commission members of political parties raising objections.
Yes.
Right. And the idea is this process doesn't stop parties going to court to file their case, because it's also a timeline.
Right.
But it's more like a remedial provision or a remedial process to ensure that what we used to have before, where returning officers were forced to declare
a results, doesn't happen anymore.
Or some of them.
Okay. Hold that thought.
Yeah.
Hold that thought. We have to take a break. When we come back, I'll keep talking to Cynthia Mbamalu. Cynthia Mbamalu is a director of programs at YAGA. She's also a lawyer, and she's talking to us about the report from the EU's election observer mission. I'm Sandra Ezekwesili. Don't go away.
This. Julius, tell me in 20 seconds 5 things Samsung customer service has to offer.
1. Samsung offers 24 months manufacturer's warranty on all our products purchased from Nigeria authorized stores and dealers. 2. Samsung Care Plus, a screen repair cover for up to 12 months, activated for free within 30 days of your purchase. 3. Verified WhatsApp channel for easy and swift support, and the Samsung customer service.
Relax. I've got Cynthia Mbamalu on the show with me. Cynthia is the Director of Programs at YAGA. And Cynthia is talking to me about the report from the EU's election observer mission. They observed the February 25th and March 18th elections. And they say that there are a ton of things that need to be worked on. I want to move to their second recommendation, Cynthia. Yesterday, when I was talking with Samson, we started to look at the second recommendation, right? And it says that results should be uploaded only in real time and only from the polling unit. And collation should be done openly and transparently, with collation forms uploaded as well. However, Cynthia, we already have this provided for in the electoral guidelines. So doesn't this mean that rules are not enough if the rules are not followed?
Yes, and I think that's where we talk about the role, the responsibility on the part of the commission. Because, like I mentioned first, you have a guideline. Mm-hmm. Your guideline provides for the process. So if you read the guideline, the INEC guideline, it talks about at the end of voting, presiding officer is supposed to take a picture of the result, upload it on the portal using the BVAS, upload it on the portal, right? Yeah. Now, there's the conversation around who is held responsible for the non-compliance with the rules or to the rules. Yeah. Because if results are supposed to be flexible, if they were not uploaded high, if someone defaulted, who is going to hold that person accountable? That's one part. Because, like you said, the guideline is there, meaning there's a rule on the Electoral Commission to start its disciplinary actions. There is also the requirement of at the level of collation, the verification required. If that wasn't done, what happened? And if it's a problem of the portal was not, let's say, for instance, the portal had a set technical glitches or whatever form, I'm not sure. Like I said, that's the only information we have with regards to the portal. Who were those responsible to ensure the portal worked? And how are they being held accountable? Because if they failed in their responsibility, it meant that they would cause a breach of the regulations. And a breach of the regulations should come with sanctions, because this is a policy of the Electoral Commission. So honestly, it's more around sanctions. And perhaps one of the reasons they are putting this recommendation is not that this is not in the guidelines. Like I said, it's just to provide better clarity. We already have seen the opportunities in the Electoral Act to further strengthen these provisions around results management and to attract or attach penalties from where there's a breach. Because one of the things that ensures compliance, if there is a corresponding penalty to non-compliance, that is the only way you curb impunity. Because at this point, what we've only heard from the commission was technical glitches, but there's no, like I said, no explanation on this is why it failed, and these are the people that will be held responsible for that. So honestly, when I read the recommendation, I'm almost like, well, we have this already. If we deal with ambiguity, this already should be, rather, it's already in our guidelines. Right. This is something that should be followed through. Right. And if it wasn't followed through, then the Electoral Commission ought to speak to us. Who are those held responsible for the failures that we observed in the results management process, especially for the presidential elections? Because, interestingly, the results for the Senate and the House
and the elections that happened in Oshun, by the way, the
Oshun elections, the Edo elections, the iReV portal worked, and which is why, like I said, I don't see an excuse on the part of the Electoral Commission, because iReV portal has been tested before 2023. It was first, they first tried it in Edo for state level elections. Yes. Edo and Ondo. Yes. That happened in the COVID years. Yes. So 2020. Yes. And then in 2021 we had the Anambra governorship elections. Yes. And we also had the Ekiti and Osun 2022.
So these are all the things. These are all the things. These are all the processes that built public trust. And so when INEC came back and INEC said, we're going to do this thing in real time, it was easy for people to believe that this thing will happen in real time because people had seen it happen in these pilot locations in real time. Now, Cynthia, the EU also recommends that all of these uploads should be in a format that is easy to re-download from the database. When you look at iReV, the results up there are pictures of the result sheets taken with the BVAS camera, right? This makes it difficult to re-download the data for use in any meaningful way. And so you have people taking pictures of other pieces of paper or selfies, all kinds of things. But at the same time, the whole point of doing that instead of typing in the data at the polling unit is so that it's harder to manipulate. So what are the pros and cons of this particular recommendation from the EU, the re-downloadable part of this recommendation?
Yeah, so the recommendation honestly is in line with the principles of open election data.
Okay.
And part of the principle is that you have documents in readable formats and easily analyzable or accessible formats.
Okay.
And like you mentioned, the results is a scanned picture or is a picture, an image of the result that is uploaded. On the part around people uploading wrong documents or wrong images, that is a fault on training, and basically people ought to be held responsible for those very embarrassing things that they did in elections day. But now, so I mean, one of the reasons the Electoral Commission wanted to adopt this, I remember some of those conversations, was it's easier for you to build trust if people can see an image that to say someone was computing or imputing figures, because elections they are politically tense and charged in situations or processes. There could be pressure, and instead of typing 10, someone types 100 or types 1, and it would be more, it will guarantee better transparency if it's an image uploaded. However, with technology, there are different ways this can be done. Because I know one of the proposals where there are technology that can, when you upload, can convert. So it is now at the point of, I'm not a tech person, so this is my layman understanding.
Yes.
It will be at the level of those who manage the portal, the tech developers, to write the script that could help convert as it's uploaded. Because one of the issues we're trying to avoid, if you think about countries where, like the 2017 Kenyan elections, the one before last year, one of the challenges that they had in the electronic transmission, which was why they learned from, because Kenya last year, what they also did was take a picture and upload, was because it is easier for people to change figures in imputing and than to manipulate an image if people are there. Because party agents are present, and the idea is if party agents are present, you can only take a picture of the result sheet and upload, and no one can change that.
Right.
So honestly, it's a bit tricky. However, one of the things we also do believe is the Electoral Commission also has the responsibility to publish polling unit results in real time on online platforms or on their internet platforms. Now, if you notice that on election day or post by Sunday, there were now 2 portals. If you followed,
yes.
One, the first one required creating an account with a password.
Yes.
Which apparently was cumbersome, and I know recommendations were raised on, is this really sustainable if 100 of thousands of voters start to create an account at the same time? And subsequently, another portal came up which did not require
a password
account. So you could a password. You could just log onto the portal and download results.
Yes.
Now, there were certain differences with that because it seemed that that other platform for results uploaded. So the first platform, the idea was one BVAS configures a polling unit, uploads the results to the portal. So it is the BVAS, it's called the location is coordinated with the portal. So you can't use a BVAS for one polling unit to upload the results of another polling unit of another location. The idea was to limit individuals just upload one result and then go somewhere else and upload another result. However, the second portal that was created, which was why it seemed like it reduced that strict rule, and it says you could use some of our analysis was showing that it was at one location, one person was just using one beavers, taking several results and uploading. So it was not done at polling level, it was done at probably ward level, but not at the polling unit level, because you could see that several results were uploaded from one location. And the idea was one result from one location, because polling units had just one result.
Mm-hmm.
And so that there is also that conversation. But like I said, I do not believe we should start doing direct imputation of results. I do believe that results uploaded in the image, that there are tech solutions that can help convert as it goes up to the portal for those who want to download and easily analyze. It's almost like, and I say this, I'm not a tech person, but I also know that I've gotten PDF documents and I've gone online and I've converted this to Word documents.
To Word documents, exactly.
Yeah, I don't think there is that. Nigeria is blessed with lots of tech geniuses, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that this could be done in a better way, in a way that it does not break the strict rule of ensuring that only results from a polling is uploaded, but also for the end user, that it is easier for an end user to download and easily analyze the data in near real time.
Yeah, which brings me to a point that you raised. The EU also recommended stronger enforcement of electoral rules and better investigation and punishment of electoral crimes. It's an obvious recommendation at face value, but you get why they happen. On election day, we had people on camera saying, I will not upload results in real time. I will not upload results. And those people, we've not heard anything that happened to them. We've not heard of any prosecutions. What are the specific reasons why we don't see more enforcement of electoral rules and punishment of violators?
Well, I think it's just our attitude as a people. It's easier for us to make excuses for why things did not work than to try to solve the problem and ensure that they work next time. And when you talked about just as simple as punishing an electoral offender, have you ever wondered why there are pictures and videos of thugs who disrupt the electoral process or voting processes and cause mayhem, and yet we don't get reports of any of them serving sentence for either the murder they've committed, the arson, because most times they burn properties in election day, or bodily harm they cause to voters. And sometimes for the police, you don't even need deep investigation. Like the videos are there. You just need to go to the location where it happened. Hey, this guy, you could know him in this community. Where is he? After the process. So you don't even need some deep forensics, You just basically need to follow the evidence. Because with social media, a lot of evidences are provided for you to comment investigation online. So like I said, it's just that it's our attitude. The second is the lack of political will, honestly, which is what has enabled this culture of impunity. And that is because as long as we have beneficiaries of the flaws in the system, it's going to be difficult to muster the political will to address this major challenge of punishing offenders or sanctioning officers who have failed in their duties. Because we also need to ask, are they beneficiaries of the flaws? Are they beneficiaries from the violence that happened, the electoral? Because I'm not just limiting this down to just those who were complicit as officials of the Electoral Commission. I'm also thinking about what about those who created major issues, violent disruption of processes, and even caused people major injuries. But if there are people that benefit from that violence, there are people that benefit from the lack of compliance or the non-compliance to the rules, that political will to get things done would not be there because they are beneficiaries from that. So that's the second part. I think the third part for me, honestly, is the level of how we need to start to make and demand accountability from our public institutions. As simple as commencement of polls. We had late commencement of polls. The Electoral Commission is yet to even address us on why we had this level of late commencement of polls. If people were given monies to work with teams, logistics for transportation and what have you, and they did not use the resources to do that, they should not still be in the Electoral Commission at this point. They should be facing a disciplinary committee because the Electoral Commission is part of the public service and there is an existing code of conduct. And as a commission, you're not able to start going to court. You can, as a commission, commence disciplinary processes within the institution to sanction officials who defaulted in their rules at all levels. Because it's beyond just results. We also had some challenges on elections. There's some polling units where materials did not get to, where voters did not vote. Yeah. We had locations where materials arrived late and people voted till early hours of the following day. So what caused that, or what led to that? If people feel their responsibilities, who is holding them to account? Right. And that is where our own demand must also become very, very strong for accountability.
All right. We have to end it there, but thank you so much, Cynthia Mbamalu. Always a pleasure to have you on Hard Facts.
Thank you,
Thank
Sandra.
You. All right. Cynthia Mbamalu is the director of programs at Yaga. Yaga's entire mandate, elections. We'll take a break. When we come back from this break, the news will be at 6. After the news is done at 6, it will be time for the step down. And on today's step down, I have a woman who is dead, a sister-in-law who said to her, "Why are you rejoicing about going to give birth? You don't even know whether you will come out alive." And now the family members think that she may have had a hand in this woman's death. I'll tell you that story after the break. I'm Sandra Ezekwesili, Lagos. This is Hard Facts on 99.3 Nigeria Info. Don't go away.
Not be today. Wey some small stretch mark. They try shook face on my video. So when I can't get belle, na race I carry take rough.
And I want to assume that you would run because I want to give the listeners context for the conversation.
In 2019, you were running mate to Atiku Abubakar. What did you learn then that you will not repeat this time?
Yes, when is the president coming out to address us?
There's a few things. One, I have a burden and a passion for young people.
The fact that you have elected a man does not mean then you begin to order him around. The president will do whatever is good for the country at any given time.
Mr. Adeshino, isn't the president responsible to the people?
What should the next president do to root out stakeholders who are complicit?
You fire those that need to be fired are fired.
It's looking like a brand new Chelsea, attacking with so much fluidity. And what can you say about that, Martin? I know you follow Chelsea quite closely.
I live close to the Chelsea training ground. That's what you mean by that. I'm not a